Okay, picture this. A regular private company, with shareholders, a board of directors, the whole deal. Its main goal is to make a profit. Now imagine that same company taking over an entire country. No, seriously. It sounds like something out of a wild sci-fi movie, right? But it actually happened. It's one of the most incredible and frankly ruthless stories in history. It's a story that completely blurs the line between commerce and conquest. And it all boils down to one huge fundamental question. So how on earth does that happen? How does a private company, a company that has to answer to its shareholders about profit margins, somehow manage to conquer a massive subcontinent? That's the central puzzle we're going to dig into today. I mean, these were merchants, right? Initially, they were just looking for a good deal on spices. How did they end up ruling over millions of people?
All right, so to really get this, you have to realize the English were not the first ones to the party, not by a long shot. After Vasco da Gama found that sea route to India way back in 1498, it was like a gold rush. India became the ultimate prize. You had the Portuguese, they got there first. Then the Dutch showed up, and right on their heels, the English. Oh, and yeah, let's not forget the French. All of a sudden, the Indian Ocean was just jam-packed with European ships, all vying for a piece of the action.
So what was the big deal? What was everybody after? Well, at first, it wasn't about land or empire. Nope, the ambition was way simpler, purely commercial. It was all about one thing: trade. And you have to understand, we're not just talking about nice-to-have luxury items here. This stuff drove the global economy at the time. Europe had a massive appetite for Indian products. We're talking the finest cotton and silk the world had ever seen. And the spices, pepper, cloves, cardamom, this stuff was literally worth its weight in gold. But here's the catch. Every single one of those European companies wanted to buy the exact same things. And as you know, that drives prices way up and profits way down. So what do? The only real way to win was to eliminate the competition. Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting. You have to watch how the company's footprint in India starts to change, bit by bit. It starts off small. In 1651, they set up what they called a factory, which wasn't a factory in our sense, more like a warehouse with offices, on the River Hooghly. But then, look what happens next. By 1696, that little warehouse has a fort built around it. Then they start playing the political game, bribing Mughal officials for land, and even convincing the emperor himself to grant them the right to trade tax-free. You see? Each step seems kind of small in its own, but together, it's a very deliberate shift from being guests to acting like they're the landlords. And, this kind of growing power, it doesn't just fly under the radar, especially not in Bengal, the richest province in all of India. The company's commercial ambition was on a collision course with local power, and that conflict was about to change everything forever. The local ruler, the Nawab of Bengal, a man named Siraj-ud-Dawla, was not a happy camper. I mean, put yourself in his shoes. He sees this armed foreign trading post growing in his own backyard. He knew exactly what was happening and correctly saw it as a threat. The company was acting like an independent power inside his territory, and he was not about to let that slide. And that brings us to a single pivotal year, 1757. The Battle of Plassey. This is it. This is the moment. The company's army, led by a man named Robert Clive, defeats the Nawab. And let me tell you, this is the year everything, and I mean everything, changes. This wasn't just a military victory. It was the moment a trading company effectively took control of its first major piece of India. And if you want to understand the mindset after that victory, just listen to this. This is Robert Clive himself. He's not talking like a merchant. He's talking like a conqueror. He said, "A great prince was dependent on my pleasure. An opulent city lay at my mercy." Wow. An entire kingdom was his for the taking. The immense wealth of Bengal was now wide open to the company. Clive and other officials made vast personal fortunes, becoming known as nababs, a twist on the Indian word nabob, kind of mocking their new opulent lifestyles. So after Plassey, the company didn't just celebrate and go home. No way. They developed a playbook, a repeatable, scalable model for expansion. They basically wrote the manual on corporate takeovers, but for entire kingdoms. One of their most effective tools was something called the Subsidiary Alliance. It was genius in a pretty sinister way. Here's how it worked. An Indian ruler would be forced to accept a British official, a resident in his court. But this resident wasn't just some advisor. He was, as one person put it, really is king of the country. The ruler then had to pay for a British army stationed in his own territory and, get this, dismiss his own. In exchange for giving up his independence, he got protection. It was basically a protection racket on a national scale. And the price for defying the company or losing a war? It was devastatingly personal. This image here shows the sons of Tipu Sultan being handed over as hostages to ensure their father's compliance. This wasn't just a political negotiation, it was a demonstration of raw, absolute power. But look, this takeover was not uncontested. The company faced fierce resistance, most famously from Tipu Sultan, known as the Tiger of Mysore. He was a brilliant military strategist who understood the threat the company posed, and he fought them tooth and nail for decades. And this amazing object right here, it perfectly captures the spirit of that resistance. It's a life-size mechanical toy that belonged to Tipu. When you turn the handle, the tiger would roar and the European soldier would shriek. Can you imagine? It's such a visceral piece of anti-colonial art. After Tipu was killed defending his capital in 1799, the British captured it and put it in a museum in London, turning a powerful symbol of defiance into a trophy of conquest. So, with their main military and political rivals subdued, the company moved to the final stage of its takeover, dismantling the old systems of governance and replacing them with its own. They started by overhauling the justice system. From 1772, they established new courts in every district. And notice who's in charge. European district collectors now supervise the whole system. This new official, the collector, became the single most powerful figure in the district, the new center of authority, replacing traditional power holders. This was a bureaucratic takeover, and it was just as important as the military one. So let's just recap this incredible transformation for a second. A company that arrived in India to buy spices was now collecting taxes, running the court system, and commanding one of the largest armies in the world. So how did they pull it off militarily? It really came down to a fundamental difference in approach. The traditional Mughal army was built around elite cavalry, or sawars, and often relied on local aristocrats to supply soldiers. The company, on the other hand, focused on a professional infantry of paid soldiers, drilled in European-style discipline and armed with modern muskets. It was a clash of military cultures, and the new, disciplined, modern model won. And here's the great irony in all of this. The instrument of conquest, the army that did the conquering, it was composed largely of Indians. The British created a huge professional military, the Sepoy Army, by recruiting Indian soldiers and reshaping them into a European-style force. The empire was built and secured by Indian soldiers fighting for a British company. And so the transformation was complete. By the dawn of the 19th century, the East India Company was no longer just a trading firm. It was, for all intents and purposes, the state. It had an army, a bureaucracy, and it ruled over millions. Which brings us right back to our big question, but with a new twist. The East India Company showed the world what happens when a for-profit entity takes over the functions of a government. Its history forces us to ask, what is the ultimate purpose of power? Is it the welfare of the governed or the profit of the shareholders? It's a question from over 200 years ago that feels more relevant than ever today.